Hello, my little pretties. It's your mistress, the Queen of Lions or Shadow Lioness here. Welcome back to another episode of Shadow Tales. Today, this is episode 2, and I am going to be telling you guys another Grimm's fairy tale story. And today, we are going to be doing Cinderella. There was once upon a time lived a young girl whose name was Cinderella. When her mother died, her father had married another woman, a widow with 2 daughters. And her stepmother didn't like her even one bit. All the nice things and the kind thoughts and loving touches were her own daughters, not just the thoughts of love, but also dresses, shoes, shawls, delicious food, comfy beds, as well as every home comfort. All this was laid on her daughters. But as for Cinderella, there was nothing at all. Cinderella was living with her stepmother and her father and the stepsisters. It wasn't long until Cinderella's father died at least a year or so later, leaving Cinderella with a big problem. Cinderella, even dressed in rags with a dusty gray face from all the cinders, was a lovely young girl, while her stepsisters, no matter how splendid and elegant their clothes are, they were clumsy, lumpy, and ugly, and always would be. Even when new dresses arrived at the house, Cinderella did not get anything. But of course, that was all going to change one day. One day, Cinderella's stepmother got up and looked to see that there was no breakfast on the table. "Cinderella!" she called. "Can you please bring me some food?" Of course, Cinderella was in the middle of doing something, just laundry. "Yes, stepmother," she said. She had to pause her laundry for a little bit as she went to get breakfast. And even sometimes her stepsisters would even call Cinderella to help her. "Cinderella, can you tidy up my room? Cinderella, can you please fold the clothes for me?" All the clothes and everything that Cinderella has to do was all being put pressured on. But that all changed one day when there was a ball to be held at a castle, and the stepsisters were going to go to it. Although how they found that out was a letter was presented by the king. Of course, the stepmother read the letter. "Well," said Cinderella, "it appears to be a ball, and a prince would be there, and he shall choose his bride," said the stepmother. Of course, Cinderella wanted to go, but the stepmother thought for a moment. "I'm afraid you will not be able to go to the ball," she said. "Why not?" Cinderella asked. "Well, 1, you're much too dirty, and you have nothing to wear." Of course, Cinderella wasn't even going to complain about it. She was very not happy that Cinderella sighed and looked down. Of course, the mice decided to build Cinderella a dress so she can go to the ball. But as they were doing that, it did not even work. The dress wasn't really that great. Of course, that evening, though, when the stepmother and stepsisters had left for the ball, Cinderella was sighing down as she sat down on what seemed to be the bed. Of course, suddenly something amazing happened. There where Cinderella saw was a bright light, and a fairy appeared. "Don't be ashamed, Cinderella," said the fairy. "The wind blew me your size. I know you would love to go to the ball, and you shall." "But how can I? I'm dressed in rags," Cinderella asked. "The servants will turn me away." The fairy smiled with a flick of her magic wand. Cinderella found herself wearing the most beautiful dress and the loveliest ever seen in the realm. "Now with that settled the matter of the dress," said the fairy, "you will need a coach. A real lady can never go to a ball on foot." "Quick, get me a pumpkin," she ordered. "Oh, of course," Cinderella said, rushing away when the fairy turned to the cat. "You bring me 7 mice." The cat nodded, and he ended up going to get the mice. Nice. Within the magic, the fairy godmother turned the pumpkin into a coach. The mice became 6 white horses, and the 7th mouse turned into a coachman. And even then Cinderella was surprised. I shall present you at the castle. You will soon see the prince, who is in honor of the ball being held, and will be enchanted with your loveliness. But remember, you must leave the ball at midnight and come home, for that is when the spell ends. Your coach will turn back into a pumpkin, the horse will become mice again, and the coachman will turn back into a mouse. And you will be dressed again in rags and wearing clogs instead of these dainty little slippers. Do you understand?" Cinderella smiled and said, "Yes, I understand." When Cinderella got into the coach and entered the ballroom at the palace, a hush fell on everyone as they stopped in mid-sentence to admire her elegance and beauty and grace. "Who can that be?" people asked. The two stepsisters also wondered who the newcomer was, for never in a month of Sundays they would even ever have guessed the most beautiful girl who was really poor Cinderella, who talked to the cat. When the prince set his eyes on Cinderella, he was struck by her beauty. Walking over to her and bowed deeply and asked her to dance. And so, with great disappointment of all the young ladies, he danced with Cinderella all evening. "Who are you, my fair maiden?" the prince asked her, but Cinderella only replied, "What does it matter who am I? You will never see me again anyway." "Oh, but I shall, I'm quite certain," the prince said. Cinderella had a wonderful time at the ball, when all of a sudden when she heard the clock struck midnight, the first stroke of it, she remembered what the fairy said. Without a word goodbye, she slipped from the prince's arms and ran down the steps. As she ran down she lost one of her slippers, but not for a moment she did dream about stopping to pick it up. If the last stroke of midnight were to sound, oh, what a disaster that would be. So she fled and vanished into the night. The prince, who was now madly in love with her, picked up her slipper and turned to his ministers. "Go and search for everywhere the girl whose foot the slipper fits. I will never be content until I find her." So the ministers tried the slipper on every foot of the girls the next day. But of course, with that said, the next morning Cinderella was working with the stepsisters doing their usual thing. And of course, the stepmother was just reading her book. When all of a sudden, a knock came to the door, and there seemed to be a prince, along with his minister. "What are you doing here?" asked the stepmother. "Oh, we've came here to see if any of your daughters would happen to fit in this slipper," asked the prince. "And if one of them do fit into that slipper, then I shall marry them, or whoever the maiden fits into their slipper," said the prince. As the prince tied the slipper on the first stepsister, the stepsister's toe was too big and it would not fit. "Oh man," she said, "why won't my slippers fit?" The stepmother said, "Well, stepsister, you may cut off your toe," she said. She handed the knife towards the first stepsister. But of course the prince saw this was a trick, so he took the knife away and said no way. So with that being the case, the second stepsister tried the slipper, but her heel was much too big. Of course she was going to try to do the same thing that the stepsister tried, but it failed, and Cinderella stood up. "Maybe it'll fit me," she said. "Of course we can try," the prince said, although the stepmother was about to protest. But when Cinderella's foot fits in the slipper perfectly, this stunned everyone. "That awfully untidy girl simply cannot have been at the ball," snapped her stepmother. "Tell the prince that he ought to marry one of my two daughters. Can't you see how ugly Cinderella is? Can't you?" She suddenly broke off, for the fairy had appeared. "That is enough," the fairy exclaimed. "Magic or magic wand." In a flash, Cinderella appeared in a splendid dress, shining with her youth and beauty. Her stepmother and stepsisters gasped at her amazement, and the minister said, "Come with us, Cinderella. The prince awaits you to present his engagement ring." So Cinderella joyfully went with them, and lived happily ever after with the prince. He and Cinderella had finally got married. Well, my little pretties, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Shadow Tales. And this story, Cinderella, is by the Brothers Grimm, or Grimm's Fairy Tales. If you happen to enjoy this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and even ring the bell for notification so you will never miss an upload. And as always, I will be catching you in the next video. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.